Hey, what's up, Tim?
What's up, Jason? This is cool to be in the metaverse with you. It's
This
wild.
is
This is a trip.
it's true. Yeah, you and I have we've done a podcast together. We've had a bunch of phone calls, but this is the first time we've ever met in the metaverse. So this is groundbreaking.
Definitely. And I am obviously still getting oriented here. You've given me a few minutes to do some testing and tuning, but let me get turned around here because all right, there we go. Is that good? Is that a
Oh
good spot?
yeah,
Should I stand here?
that's awesome. That's awesome, Tim.
Awesome.
So this will be your very first podcast in the metaverse, right, Tim? And just for our audience, could you just maybe introduce yourself? Tell them a little bit about you, about what you do, about your podcast, and then we'll kind of dive into the topics for today.
Sure, I kid that I'm a recovering digital marketer and ambassador for the real world. But what that really means is I spent part of my career in digital marketing and then ultimately found myself working at a billboard company where I discovered that billboards and out of home advertising drive incredible impact for brands as an advertising marketing technique. So, or tactic rather. So, through that discovery process, I really wanted to more myself and started a podcast. And through that process, wound up working for a startup and was early on there. And we grew that to 60 people. And so through this experience of uncovering the power of out of home and hosting a podcast about that, obviously our paths crossed. And I'm excited to talk about what the opportunities could be for out of home advertising and using a platform like the metaverse to further enable brands. But podcast is called Out of Home Insider. If anyone's curious, check that out anywhere fine podcasts are enjoyed.
Awesome, awesome. Well, you guys heard it from Tim directly. Definitely check it out. He's had some really cool guests, and the content is fantastic. So, but let's dive in. So, how this is such a cool topic, but how does out of home and metaverse have anything to do with each other, Tim? I mean, I think for our audience, these things couldn't feel more distant from each other, right?
I think so. And I think that the initial kind of application of out of home advertising in the metaverse, it seems native to want to build an out of home media company, if you will, a company that offers placements for advertising in the metaverse. That I think is everyone's initial thought when they hear metaverse plus out of home advertising. And there's been some interesting companies that have certainly pursued and are doing interesting things in that space. But I instantly saw the application of the metaverse as a sales enablement tool when we first connected and we were in this specific environment. I'm looking around and I'm seeing obviously the organic out of home that is built into the space. It wouldn't make sense to not see these things in any sort of environment that is supposed to represent the real world. So seeing that use case, seeing the really specific application as a tool for sales teams to really demonstrate what's sometimes hard to show, and that is the feeling that an out of home campaign gives you. What do you feel when you see that painted wallscape and the wrapped storefronts and the kiosks, when all those things are working together? It makes you feel something. And right now, from a sales perspective in the offline out of home media business, we're really confined to two-dimensional PDF, pictures of billboards that were taken years ago from angles that don't really represent how someone might see it. Or the best way that we can tell a story about the buyer's journey is with a heat map and maybe a dashboard or a report that shows you some insights about the audience. And I just think that this is such a practical way to show the power of out of home and to create what a customer goes through on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely, and I love that, and I love that insight that you have. in that subject, and just kind of knowing how things are done now versus how they maybe could be done. And with that, let's actually go for a little walk as we continue the conversation. Let's maybe walk over this way and go. Okay, Tim. So give me some examples. I mean, like what? There's so much about out of home that I don't know. How could someone use an environment like this if they're doing something really unique with out of home?
I think that's kind of the beautiful thing about out of home and what attracts so many folks to it as entrepreneurs, as brands, marketers, etc. I think the attraction and the beautiful thing about it is you can use any surface to create the desired effect or outcome. So there are entire companies where their business is putting banners on construction site barricades, making use of that space. So imagine that, right? Imagine being that type of media company and being able to show, hey, here's how my barricade is going to fit in with the rest of your campaign. Or as a brand, being able to imagine it for themselves, being, hey, how would adding this element to my campaign look with the rest of the placements? So even something as simple as a construction site in the metaverse, this brick wall off to our sides here on the movie theater, any of this space becomes really a tangible way to showcase the power of out of home. The light pole banners, it's all here to make use of.
I love that, man. I love that. But let's actually keep walking as we talk, because you gave a lot of cool examples, and look at that, we even have some construction barriers here, and we've got some pretty interesting signage over here on this building, and I'm sure that as you're seeing everything, your mind's just racing, like, oh, I could do this, I could do that.
Oh yeah, just all of the placements, the different storefronts, the creative application here. I think this is really cool. Obviously, this kind of fits a vibe, but I'm sure you've got different retailers who are thinking about how do we imagine our space that we want to make an investment in. So whether it's advertising or making that investment in a physical retail location, this is really cool. I think that I could see a lot of folks using this.
Oh, absolutely. And you speaking about storefronts, if we come over here, we can actually see we've got a nice example of a storefront over here. And obviously this is just an example, but I think retail like this is a great way to showcase what's possible. And yeah, Tim, like, so what do you think?
One of the things that I'm thinking about as we're moving through the environment is the ability to kind of change out the creative, if you will. And oftentimes one of the ways that will sell out of home advertising is through spec art. We'll create mock-ups of what the campaign could look like. Being able to dynamically replace the creative based on who I'm showing this to, whether, hey, I want to show a category specific creative, or I want to show this big brand what all of their creative could look like in the environment, or maybe I just want to show a realistic mix. Hey, right, you're only getting 10% share of voice. This is what it's going to look and feel like. Is that something that you can do with an environment like this? Can you dynamically change out those creatives?
Oh, absolutely. We can do it. We can do it kind of on a case-by-case basis, or technology like this, we can just set up systems to where an advertiser could just do it on the fly. Depending on, like, if they're, like you talked about earlier, maybe using it as like a sales tool. We could create a system where they could just kind of swap out ads whenever for different advertisers, or maybe even change like the time of day and the environment to kind of showcase what it might look like. Yeah, that kind of stuff is super possible. I would imagine probably it would be kind of expensive to try and do the same thing in the physical world, to try and do like constantly change out ads. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. And nearly impossible. It comes down to obviously then the operational limitation and the production costs to do those things. And I think that's why you're seeing more folks testing with digital signage and using digital for some of that creative testing and quick deployment. But if the job to be done is understand what it's going to look and feel like, I don't know that there's a more practical way to do it, without having to kind of outlay all that capital to test in the physical world.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that's that would not be difficult to do in an environment like this, and we could do hundreds of different variations, and it probably wouldn't be that burdensome on budgets or on the actual labor. But anyways, let's keep walking. There's so much more to explore.
Do it.
Now, Tim, you in the last time that we talked when we did a podcast, I remember you talking about how some companies are still driving their clients around town to showcase the different signage. Is that pretty common, or is that limited to maybe like a few companies that aren't trying to leverage technology a little better?
Interesting. So it's typically referred to as the market ride, and I think pre-COVID there was much more of it, and that is media agencies, brands, buyers visiting the market and seeing the physical billboards or the real estate that the ad space that they were going to be on, which is still a really important piece of it, right? You want to know that, hey, this billboard that I'm buying on the left-hand side of the road, it's blocked by trees. It's actually visible when you're driving a car versus a truck versus an 18-wheeler. A great way to demonstrate the journey we go through each day in our own daily lives, but then how those ad placements actually show up. We put a banner over the maybe over the valet parking sign, effective, right? This becomes a way for media companies to test new placements. I think you can add elements to an environment like this where it's a bus or a taxi cab where we put ads on top of taxis and rideshare vehicles. We wrap buses. We do other elements that move around the environment. So I think showcasing how it all works together, whether or not you sell all of those things, even just showing, hey, here's how the one thing I sell is going to fit in with the rest of everything that you're doing. That just continues to be the most interesting piece to me as we move around the space.
When you are testing new out-of-home initiatives, how do you measure that effectiveness during testing? Like, how is that being measured now versus, I mean, I have some ideas on how we could do that here. But how do they measure effectiveness currently in testing, or is it kind of guesswork?
It's a spectrum. I'll say it's a spectrum, if anything, and that is, what are all the things we want to test as marketers? We want to test which creatives drive, the outcomes that we want, which ad placements specifically are working the hardest for us, generating the highest return. So there's a variable scale of kind of how to measure these things. But I think when you're ultimately the job to be done, what you're trying to accomplish is have a good targeting strategy, and there's great data to make sure you're going to be in the right cities and the right markets, right, in the right zip codes. There's great things to do that. There's not great ways to test creative. There's not great ways to test A/B split test different creatives in out of home without spending lots and lots of money. You can do some things programmatically, but feedback loops become a challenge. So without spending a lot of money and kind of committing to a big test without surety on how you're going to measure it, it can be hard. Or deploying programmatic digital out of home, but again, being limited with feedback loops. So I think to be able to put creative into an environment and understand, hey, what's it going to look like from 100 feet? How is that different than 500 feet? What's it going to look like up on the side of a building? What's it going to look like at street level? Right? Let me play with different variations of the creative so that I can really maximize each format. There's no good way to do that. It does not exist today, at least that I know of. But I think using the metaverse to do that is a realistic way that a media company could do so.
Absolutely. And that, just as you were talking, I thought about, in terms of A/B testing, that could totally be done in the metaverse, in the sense of putting up different versions of the same ad in a digital twin of a real space, right? So we take like a real city where we're trying to target, and we could actually walk users through a normal commute or whatever it might be. And even without them giving the feedback voluntarily, we can determine how much time they spent looking at each ad as they're going. Like that, we can collect that data. And that's not something like that's completely outside of your own personal bias of like, well, this is what I think was effective for me. We can actually track, no, this is what was effective because you looked at it longer, or you didn't even notice this ad, so that wasn't effective because you didn't even look at it. So I think that kind of testing is something that media companies could look into, alongside of just planning and logistics. Ad placement. What locations are pulling the most attention for different types of ads? That could make that process very affordable and repeatable.
Very, and I think it informs real estate investment. If you're a media company or a publisher, where should we double down? What formats maybe aren't generating the type of attention that we thought were, and how can you skate to the puck as a media company by using insights like that? I think doubly it increases investment confidence by brands when you can show them more than just a heat map of here's where my customers are. I've got a billboard in the same zip code. You should be there, right? If I can take that and extend it and say, actually, based on the customers you're trying to reach, here are the right types of formats. Here are the most effective creatives. So before you ever spend a dime on production or on the physical media itself, you're going into it with a really good game plan that's more than targeting and more than a hypothesis about how we're going to measure it. You're going in with an informed, intelligent, insight-driven plan based on the things are going to work.
I learn new stuff every time that I talk to you, Tim. I absolutely love it.
Same, brother. Same. We could do this every weekend.
Well, we probably could actually, because
it's so practical.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the things I love, you're in New Jersey, I'm in Austin, Texas, and whenever we're here like this, it actually feels like we're standing next to each other. So that's actually really cool. I feel like I know you super well, even though I've never actually like shaking your hand or anything.
It's crazy. It was over there at the hall across the street, and I think that was the first time I said it out loud. It was the realization for myself is that this feels more like real life than being on a Zoom. We were on a Google Meet before we jumped into this environment. I feel more comfortable, or just as comfortable. I would argue more comfortable. I feel like I'm playing a game. I feel like I'm playing a game and just talking to a friend while we're playing a game. It's more native, I think, than even just getting on a screen share.
Absolutely. I feel the same.
Once you figure out the walking around part, that I was challenged with that. Once you figure out walking around, you'd be a pro.
Absolutely, I love it. All right, cool. Hey Tim, let's go grab a virtual coffee over here.
Virtual coffee is going to make me want a real coffee after this. So it's a nice coffee shop.
It's not bad. It has a little bit of like a European feel to it. We can't really do this kind of thing out in Texas right now. It's a little bit too hot. What's up, Tim? I can see you clear as day.
Yeah, it's wild. I don't know what I'm experiencing right now, but this is pretty incredible.
This is you and I sitting at a table having coffee 500, 600 miles away from each other.
Right, when all of the great salespeople in our lives send out the email for, hey, would you like to have a virtual coffee? I don't think any of them ever imagined being able to do. But I like how your screen is kind of curved. It feels more natural that way. I was almost imagining this was just gonna like pop up picture in picture, but yeah, like as you're turning, it's almost more like a helmet face shield screen than something that feels forced into my perspective.
Absolutely. And this is for me, this is what feels the most natural to have a conversation. I can do this for hours and hours and hours, and I don't feel tired. But man, after like the first hour and a half of Zoom calls, I'm done. I'm like, all right, I need a break or a nap or something.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to maybe ask you a question and flip the script a little bit. Like,
sure.
As a product builder, right? BizzTalk, like how do you come to the realization that, hey, a curved kind of semi-transparent screen is going to be a more native way to experience video in this environment? Like, what is the process to go from kind of how we think of things day in our lives? Picture in picture is the most direct application I can think of, but like, what's the process of figuring that out? I don't know that I would ever figure that out.
So that's interesting. It was a process, but it started off with, hey, when we talk, our avatars' mouths need to move so it feels like we're talking to each other. And then it was, well, that's not good enough. We really would love to have the avatars, facial expressions match, but that's a little bit more complicated. It's not out of the scope of possibilities. It's there, but then we need avatars that look like us. And it said, well, until we get photorealistic avatars that are recognizable, right, that look like us, and the facial expressions are matching from your camera, what's the way that we can close the gap from there? And it was, well, let's use video, but let's do it in a dynamic way. And we have really great engineers who are also product people, which is kind of rare. You don't usually see engineers and product people in the same, wearing the same hat. But they said, this could work, but the flat screen doesn't work, so it needs to be a little bit curved, and it can't just be limited to the face, because then we hit what's called the uncanny valley, where like it's trying too hard to look like real life. So this is like the nice balance for now, but as technology improves, it'll actually get even better. But from here, it's like I know that we're not trying to simulate real life perfectly, but this is a much more natural way, right? So I'm not, your face isn't taking up my entire view, right? I've also got this view of these trees and these bushes and the street, the buildings behind me. Like, that's normal. If you and I are having a real conversation, that's what it's going to be like. And I can still see you, but it's a lot more natural. Like a Zoom call or regular video calls, it's just not 100% natural. And your brain knows that. Subconsciously, it knows this is not real. And that's why we get tired. That's why we get Zoom fatigue. It's because the brain knows this is not how it's supposed to be. But you being on video the way you are, curved screen in front of your avatar's face, and in the peripheral view that you would normally be if we were sitting across from each other, now my brain is like, oh yeah, this is totally natural. We could do this all day.
And I noticed this just doing podcasts as often as I do, and I'm sure for anyone that spends a lot of time on Zoom or Google Meets or any sort of, web-based screen share like that is almost a self-conscious insecurity, because I'm seeing myself saying the things, and I find that I am more comfortable when I don't see myself.
Right.
I don't know if that's true for anybody else, but I am more comfortable talking to you, not looking at myself, versus being forced to see myself in a little screen in the lower right-hand corner where I'm wondering, what are they judging, the thing I just said? Did my facial expression look weird? Is there a crumb in my beard? Like, all of these other elements. Again, I don't know if there's a psychological reasoning behind that, but it's something that I am noticing through this experience. I tend to look out my window and think while I talk. That would be rude on a Zoom. I wouldn't be making eye contact. You would think I was disengaged. But
right.
For me, the most stimulating conversation comes from not staring at a screen. I don't know.
Right.
Call me crazy.
I agree. Yeah, and I think that also plays into it, right? This just, if we're having a real conversation, there's not a little camera of myself in my view, right? So our brain also
up a pocket mirror.
Right. It's your brain knows it's not natural to be able to see yourself all the time.
Oh, true.
And we can't help it as humans, right? If we're in a call with 20 people, the thing we spend the most time looking at is ourselves. So
absolutely. Because we assume everyone else is also looking at us. The reality is no one is. They're all looking at themselves because we're all doing the same thing.
Exactly. And then in this situation, I'm only looking at you, and occasionally I'm looking in the background of like, okay, hey, like there's like, you know what? Actually, our environment is really cool. Our platform is super cool.
It's super cool. I just heard a plane fly overhead, right? I'm looking at the bike. I'm looking at the fruit stand behind you and being reminded that I need to go grocery shopping.
That's
not to shill too hard for the platform, but this is, we've been together for a little bit over an hour now.
That's right.
If I was on a Zoom for an hour, I'd be ready to go.
Yes, absolutely. Good stuff. So, but on that note, Tim, we're coming up on our time that we have for our show, and yeah, I know that this is definitely going to be one that our viewers and your viewers are going to be really excited to check out. But what are kind of your final thoughts? What else do you want to leave with the audience on this topic before we part ways? And most certainly we'll be doing another one soon, because there is just so much to talk about, and the technology is evolving all the time. But what do you want to leave with everybody before we do, call it a day?
Forget what you heard. Be open-minded to what the metaverse can do for your business. Can it solve a problem for your company? Whether it's better internal coordination and just being a tool for your teams to communicate, or using it as a sales tool. I think changing the way that we think about the metaverse as this next frontier we have to conquer, reframing that and thinking about it as, how can this be a tool that solves problems in my business today, is a huge unlock for anyone listening, but particularly out of home, offline media companies and brands who want to do out of home.
Amazing. That's so awesome, Tim. Thanks again for being here and for again being one of kind of our first guests back and kicking off BizzTalk again. And just always love when you and I get a chance to get together and chat, man. It's the best. I really love it.
Thanks for having me here. Thanks for including me in this experience, and I'm excited for the show to be back, because I've gotten a ton of value out of version 1, so I know folks are going to get a ton of value out of this experience as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And then again, just a reminder for everybody, check out Tim and his podcast. Check him out on LinkedIn, where he's always sharing tons of content. And it's OOH Insider, right? That's the name of the podcast.
OOH Insider. anywhere you enjoy fine podcasts, or you can go to the oohinsider.com and find all the episodes there.
Amazing. And there's one with you and I in there too, right?
Sure is. There sure is. Web3 for Dummies.
Web3 for Dummies. I love it. I love it. Awesome. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time. Take care.